Hello, I'm Dr. Barbara Fiese from the Family Resiliency Center at University of Illinois, and today I'm going to talk with you about the importance of family mealtimes, particularly as protecting children from childhood obesity and some of the associated risks. You might wonder why people would go and talk about family mealtimes with the impression that maybe family mealtimes are on the decline and families don't actually practice mealtimes together anymore. But that's actually not the case. Most families today in the United States, about 67% of them report that they regularly eat together. These are not long, drawn-out, elaborate affairs. In fact, they only last between about 18 to 20 minutes. And a little over 80% of parents report that this is the best time to find out what's going on with their children. A colleague of mine and I conducted a meta-analysis a couple of years ago to find out what the cumulative effect of sharing a meal together might be on children's nutritional health. A meta-analysis is where you compile the results of studies that have been conducted over a period of time. And so just some of the details about this particular meta-analysis. There were 17 studies in the meta-analysis, which comprised 836 children, and the children were between 2 and 17 years of age. So by looking at this meta-analysis, we're able to determine effect sizes or odds ratios across a variety of nutritional health outcomes that we can't do in just one single study. Because most of these studies are cross-sectional, they're correlational, and we can't really determine cause and effect, but we can determine the effect size compiling these very large studies. What we found is that sharing meals together, sharing family meals together 3 or more times a week, reduced the odds for being overweight by 12%, reduced the odds for eating unhealthy foods by 20%, reduced the odds for eating disorders by 30%, and increased the odds for eating healthy foods by 24%. So these are really kind of powerful numbers. But if you're a good skeptic, which I hope you are, you should be saying, wait a minute, just sharing meals together with your family 3 or more times a week, all of a sudden I'm going to be nutritionally healthy. Well, that's probably not the case. Because what you want to ask yourself, what is it that's going on by being together around the table that may result in better outcomes for kids? So much of the focus today is really trying to identify what's the process during family meals, or what are the characteristics that go together when families share meals together versus when they don't share family meals together. So looking through social interactions and looking at some of the socio-demographic differences, then we can kind of tease apart what makes the differences in why family meals may be somewhat powerful in predicting children's nutritional health. So there seem to be, looking across a whole variety of studies that have been conducted over the last 10 or 15 years, there seem to be some essential ingredients for healthy family meal times. The first is responsive and engaged parenting. We know that good parenting goes along with a lot of good outcomes, but specific to feeding, we find that parents that are responsive to their children's calls for food and are engaged during meal times, and they are not disengaged or dismissive, then they tend to have children who have healthier nutritional outcomes. We also find that structure and predictability are very important. That is, what are the routines that get set up around family meals? And I don't mean like really rigid routines that we have to eat at 5:25 every night, but there is some predictability that you know who's expected to be home. Sometimes that involves like Tuesday night is spaghetti night and Saturday night is pizza night. But for children this is really important, because when they have expectations and predictability, then they feel more secure, they feel more calm, and they know what to expect, which may slow down the pace of eating and it may reduce distress. The third thing is that you want a calm environment that is free of distractions. And those distractions can include things like having the television on, talking on your cell phone, playing video games, having a lot of background noise. And when you have those kinds of environments, then what we find is that people tend to eat more. They engage in more of what's been referred to as mindless eating, and they don't really pay attention to what's on their plate. The final thing is that if you repeat this good structure, this predictability, good organization, responsive parenting, a calm environment over time, then it forms good emotional bonds within the family, and it can become a ritual, which we know is passed down across generations and is related to good mental health as well as nutritional health. So some of the findings that in research studies that other researchers and some of the researchers here at the Family Resiliency Center have found is that for responsive parenting has been related to increased consumption of fruits and vegetable and dairy. Disengaged parenting, that is being away from the table or not paying attention to the children's emotional needs, is related to increased consumption of high-fat foods, sugar-sweetened beverages. And authoritarian practices are those where there is sort of a high control during feeding practices, is also related to consumption of these more energy-dense, less healthy kinds of foods. In terms of some of these more family dynamic kinds of behaviors, some of the things that the research has found is that the more time that you spend in sort of positive engagement and positive communication is related to lower risk for obesity and overweight. And I think it's really important to emphasize that these are not really complex, overly wrought, drawn out conversations. You know, they can be as simple as, are we going to get a puppy tomorrow? Or what happened in school? It's really showing that genuine concern, that you care about what's going on in everybody's day. The other thing that we find is that families that engage in more of this action and distraction, whether they're watching television, they're talking on the cell phone, or they're being away from the table, that actually increases the child's risk for being overweight or obese. We have talked earlier in this semester about racial and ethnic differences for risk for obesity, and the findings with social interaction during mealtimes is somewhat mixed. If you look at sheer frequency of sharing mealtimes together, there's a little bit of difference kind of at the low end. That is, you might find that in some African American families, particularly for teens, they may be less likely to share meals together. That is, that they don't share meals together at all. But if you look at if they share meals together 3 or 4 times a week, then those differences pretty much wash out. So it's really important to look at these inconsistencies in the reports in the literature with a very, very careful eye and not make big assumptions. There's been some work that was recently reported by Angela Kong, a member of our group, and she found some interesting differences in sort of these family process variables, and found that these sort of action and distraction behaviors were more prevalent in a small study of African American families. But she also found that these highly engaged, direct communications showing interest in what's going on in your life was more prevalent in Hispanic families. These kinds of differences really need to be looked into much more carefully. They have very important implications for prevention and intervention programs so that we can tailor educational messages to families that come from different cultural backgrounds. One of the barriers that people talk about, they say, I don't have time to eat together with my family. It's really too much of a hassle. Really, when we run focus groups with families, and it's been reported in the literature, the barriers are sometimes not so much time as behavioral challenges in the family. And some of these behaviors are kids fighting with each other at the table, younger children having temper tantrums over the kind of food that's being served to them and they don't like them, scheduling problems, managing work-life stress, getting some assistance from your partner, and with teens, managing all their activities and being home together. So to address some of these behavioral challenges at the Family Resiliency Center, we have developed a series of public service announcements to help families better manage some of these behavioral challenges. So I'd like to close this micro lecture with one of those public service announcements.
Cell phones, the vacuum, TVs, and slamming doors. They're a part of life, but they don't have to be a part of dinner. Take 20. Devote just 20 minutes each night to a more meaningful mealtime with these basics. Sit down, turn it off, put it away. Don't let life drown out your dinner. Control the chaos and carve out some together time for your busy family. Don't just do it for them, do it for you too. Family dinner. Kids, eat it up.